On the race to capture the city of Cape Town, we're now joined by political analyst Professor Tinyiko Maluleke. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Good evening, Peter, and good evening to your viewers.
This past week, we've been talking about various cities across the country. We talked about eThekwini and Johannesburg. And some of these places, the race is too tight to call, they say. But it seems, and I'm wondering, is Cape Town a little bit more obvious what's going to happen there?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think Cape Town is anything like too close to call. Mm-hmm. It hasn't been for a long time. You must remember that since 2007, it has been in the hands of the DA and has never looked like it was about to slip away from the DA. Mm-hmm. That is how many years now? 2007, more than 10 years, 13 years or so. So it's not likely that we're going to see a change there, because not only did the DA win convincingly last time, they improved on their percentage margin between 2011 and 2016. And the margin by which they rose is the margin by which the ANC lost, if not more, for example, just to compare the two parties. Yeah.
So is it likely that at the very least they'll stay the same? I think they're sitting with 154 seats at the moment. Or might they still see some improvements, even though this time around, record number of independent candidates, and also EFF were new kids on the block the last time, a bit more seasoned. They've been around the laps a few times now, and they managed to garner 7 seats in the first attempt. So could that be a change in dynamic, even if it's not a winning one?
Well, already the EFF did have some impact in Cape Town. The AIC, even the PAC, if you want, had a bit of impact in Cape Town. The problem for the ANC is that it's in the ANC strongholds that your EFF and other smaller parties have impact. So in other words, it seems that they take away from the ANC rather than from the DA. And of the 116 odd wards in the city, the DA won more than 80, I think 81, if I'm not mistaken, last time around. And in the few areas where the ANC did very well, the EFF also did well. And I expect that the EFF is going to do the same this year.
So since the last elections, we've had things like the State Capture Commission, we've had high-profile ANC figures going to court, facing corruption charges. Has this an impact, do you think, on the vote in the Western Cape? Or is it just, look, the DA is going to win, doesn't matter what the ANC is doing?
Well, the DA has shown its own weaknesses in the period. So it's not merely that we had the state capture and all the problems of the ANC. The DA has had the De Lille saga, the DA has had the Musimaimane saga, the DA has had the Herman Mashaba saga, and many other similar issues across the DA. In fact, the DA has, it seems to me that the DA has recalibrated its whole vision ever since. It's no longer trying to win the whole country, it seems to me. So the question is whether those mistakes of the DA will come back to haunt them, and to what extent, or whether the mistakes of the ANC will weigh much more in this case, so that the DA benefits. But this is a local election, Peter. It's not a national election. Although many of our political parties would have us believe otherwise, because if you walk around the streets, they are advertising as if it was a national election, not a local election. In some cases, you don't even see the face of the councillor, the candidate. You just see the name of the party. But this being a local election, it's not likely that the big national scandals in and of themselves are going to have a big impact, because what people are worried about is, do I have lights? Are there potholes in the street? Do I have a house? Are things working locally? Those are the kinds of concerns with which people approach a local election.
Do people make a discerning difference between local and national elections, or is it the party that they vote for?
Well, the parties, I think, are playing a game here in terms of which they assume, or they have come to the conclusion that the party matters more than the candidate. So in that sense, the difference between the national election and a local election is a marginal one. That's the perspective of the party. If we look at how the parties have approached the advertising in many, many areas, and how little information they have given on their candidates. I mean, take the ANC, for example. We don't even know a single person who's going to be a mayor in those places where they will win. That's how unimportant it is from the perspective of the parties to treat this as a local election, going, as it were, for a national approach, because they believe people will go ANC, DA, or EFF, regardless of the person. I think they could be wrong, because I think South African voters are becoming sophisticated, and they want to know, who is it I can go to when there is no water in my area, or when things go wrong in my area.
Before the floor crossing sagas of 2002, 2004, how is it that the ANC have got less seats in 2016 than they had in 2000?
Well, in Cape Town in particular, it has been Cape Town has been a rather painful lesson in democracy for the ANC. If you look at it, from 2006, I think roughly, Cape Town and the Western Cape in general. So let's not just talk about Cape Town alone, because I think Cape Town represents more than half of the number of registered voters in that whole province, if one is not mistaken. I'm thinking on top of my head here. So Cape Town is important, but the whole Western Cape has been slipping away from the ANC since 2006. And the slide has been ongoing. So if there is a province which the ANC, should almost give up on, I don't want to encourage them to do that. It is the Western Cape, and Cape Town in particular, because the manner in which the DA wins in Cape Town is so convincing that even in the areas where the ANC has won, which, I mean, 116 wards, the ANC won about 35 wards last time around, out of the 116. And many of those 35 wards which they won with very much lower margins than the DA did. So I don't know, what lessons the ANC can take from that and how they can correct themselves, because they've shot themselves in the foot also a few times in that province, not just nationally.
Patricia de Lille, good party. What's going to happen there?
I think she has a lot of sympathy in Cape Town, and she is a well-known figure there. The manner in which she was hounded out of the DA has won her a lot more sympathy. But I'm not so sure that all of that sympathy is going to translate into votes. I doubt very much. I think there are people who like her a lot but will still vote for someone else, not because they dislike her, but because they think she doesn't have a chance to make a real difference there, that the numbers will be low. The so-called myth of a wasted vote, which some of the bigger parties are trading on. The idea that to vote for the good party may be a wasted vote is one that is probably going to be promoted and might work in the minds of many voters. So I don't see her not doing well at all, but I don't think she will do well enough to make a difference to how the DA or the ANC or the EFF perform.
What about Al-Jamar? What are your thoughts?
Well, they have a very strong constituency, especially around the religious communities. But how big that is has not really been borne out in previous elections. They seem to be able to get a foot in, as it were, but not much more. So my sense is the same. The DA has pretty much taken the so-called colored vote
Right.
in Cape Town. It will be very hard to wrest that away from them. Ask the ANC.
All right. So my last question was going to be actually, who is going to be supporting the DA? So they've managed to convince the bulk of the coloured community. Why have they won that? Is it language? What is it?
Well, they've done two things. They've managed to win the coloured community over, but they've also managed to do enough to get ANC voters disgruntled enough not to turn out. Okay. So the turnout has been low in places where the ANC could have done better. And the low turnout probably has to do with perceptions of how badly the ANC has performed nationally, but also locally. There's a lot of disgruntlement, especially from people living in informal settlements in and around Cape Town who feel neglected and therefore disgruntled that there won't be any difference anyway. So, but I think the DA has managed to convince the colored community that, they, as they say, where we govern, things work, and that we deliver. All that message seems to have resonated in that community more than in other communities.
All right. Thank you so much indeed, Prof. I look forward to many long conversations in the next 2 weeks, and we'll see what happens in the other major cities outside Cape Town, because I think that one, the bets have closed. Thank you so much. That's Professor Tinyiko Maluleke saying that, look, the DA are going to continue with their winning streak in the Western Cape, but it'll be interesting to see just how well the economic freedom fighters will do this time around. They were the new kids on the block last time. They didn't win any wards, but got 7 seats in council, and this was their first time out. And so it could be an interesting election in terms of how much influence they might have in the Cape Town area.